Afterward, critique the deception campaign. They say, well, it really wasn't a success of deception. The deception campaign didn't work. Instead, it was a success of security. Of course, I can cover anything. But then when you read into the writing, the Germans had the right information. They had all kinds of information, some right and some wrong. They couldn't sort it out. It was a success of ambiguity, and we couldn't even say it. Now, I've illustrated something there. Does anybody understand what I illustrated? How many times in the past have you seen in the paper or official pronouncements or documents where they say, oh, we had the information of what was going to happen after the operation. What they didn't tell us the information they had that they also thought was going to happen wasn't incorrect. How many times have you seen in the paper they tell us, say, oh, we had it, CIA, oh, goddamn, we knew it. We had that information. But they didn't tell you the other information they had that didn't agree with that, and they weren't sure what was right and what was wrong. So they were correct. They said they had the right information, but they failed to tell you those other information they had that wasn't right, because they weren't sure what was right. So this is the kind of thing we're talking about. Another example, the invasion of Italy after Sicily. Remember, we didn't intend to invade Italy. We were exploiting an existing situation. We were successful in Sicily there, following the Mussolini government, etc. We said, hey, boy, let's exploit this situation. The whole thing turned into a BS. We had all kinds of problems. Salerno, Anzio, etc. So once again, they said, why? They said, how come we couldn't get a good deception campaign going? And they said, hey, we didn't have time to set up a deception campaign. Which is correct, it takes time. Well, you can't stop the war to set up a deception campaign. You have to exploit an existing situation, and that's the time to use ambiguity. When you get a blitzkrieg going, you may have deception to start it. Once it goes, you're actually moving on ambiguity. The other guy can't keep up. One more example before I go on. The invasion of Normandy. Beautiful deception campaign. We had the Germans believe we were going to go into Pas-de-Calais. Had them convinced we were going to go into Pas-de-Calais. For over 30 days, even when we were after the peace, all those ships and troops going in, I said, boy, the main effort's really coming elsewhere. Damn good thing, because we still had a hard time. That was extraordinary. But remember, we set that up many months ahead of time to get that image in their minds. They couldn't shake it. Corporately, they couldn't, even though some of them knew that it was the wrong image, corporately, they were unable to shake that image. Okay, so here you're generating many non-cooperative mental centers of gravity in order to slow them down so it can't go. Here you give them Christ, you've got a good picture, wrong picture, you're doing exactly the wrong thing. If you can get away with it. Of course, they find out, boy, they read through the deception, you're in deep trouble. Fast transit, not only quick, we're irregular. In other words, you can not only shift gears, but they also can't get an image of what's going on. Your effort. The idea is to punch into those parts, allow them to retain their organic wholeness. Get those connections, allow them to retain their wholeness so you can pull them apart. We talked about that earlier. So if you pull all those things together, here's your payoff. You're trying to disorient. Deliberately generate a mismatch between what you see and that which you must react or adapt to. Key word, mismatch. That's disorientation. So if you think about that, if that's the way you define disorientation, now you can redefine surprise. Surprise is nothing more than a form of disorientation. It's not defined in dictionaries or textbooks, but it's nothing more than a form of disorientation. And it's usually generated by perceiving extreme change over a short period of time. Perceiving, I didn't say it's done that way. In other words, how many times in your life you've seen something go on, all of a sudden you realize it's going on for a long time, it's boom, good. Walk. Or it can be done because it's quick, or a combination. So you can generate this with ambiguity, deception, etc., or any combination. By perceiving. And shock is nothing more than what you call a paralyzing state of disorientation. So awesome, it's paralyzed. You can't react, you can't adapt. So in that sense, shock is what I call a hard form of surprise. And disrupt, state of being split apart, broken up, or torn asunder. In other words, generate as many non-cooperative centers of gravity. So here are these things you're doing. Here's the payoff. There's your aim. Once again, natural fallout, natural consequence. Now let's ask ourselves a question. Surprise and shock are a form of disorientation. Why not just remove them from the board and only use disorientation and disruption? Might want to do that. Then again, let's be careful before we jump into the bag. Let's examine surprise and shock a bit more before we make that decision. And here's a note directed toward that. If you represent an overload, you only want the immediate ability to respond or adapt. In other words, when you're surprised, in a sense, you're overloaded, even if it's for a short period of time. So surprise and shock, in other senses, we live in overload. So if that's the case, let's reset up. And here's basically what we're trying to do. We're trying to do these things. We're trying to disorient the guy, disrupt the guy, we're trying to overload him. So we can't cope. Note that a woke or threatening against reference to one's mental or physical capacity to adapt or do it. Think about your own life. There's times when sometimes a lot of things happen, boy, you're having a hard time with that. Now, go for it. Only you try to back up, and people usually let you off the hook. What if they don't? You're in deep trouble. And of course, you can think of the aim this way, or you can think of it that way. But now look at that chart. What's the highest content there? That has a high mental content. Nutrition has a high physical content. Maneuver has a high mental content. Look at it. See? High mental. You see, most often you see a newspaper talking about maneuvers about troops going down this highway or that. You don't get the whole picture. You got to bring in the mental in. You don't dislocate a mind, you disorient. And when a guy's mentally disoriented, is he coping with the situation or he's isolated from it? So you've got mental isolation. Okay? With that, let's go on to the moral part. An aspect of it. Like I said, I spent a lot of time with General Ball, somewhere in 1981. In any case, his theme, note this, no recipes for organization, communication, tactical leadership. No recipes, no scheme. In other words, he wants to be adaptable and unpredictable. If he wanted to talk about flying, he wouldn't even do that. He wants to wide freedom for subordinates to exercise, yet harmonized within the intent of superior command. Matter of fact, we had a meeting up in one of the assistant secretary's office. This guy kept saying, well, how do you tell the guys to do it? Well, I don't tell them how to do anything. We just lay down a mission. Once it's agreed upon, he determines how it's going to be carried out. I go do something else. The guy said, well, how do you know he's going to do it your way? He said, why is that important? As long as he gets the job done. He probably will do it different. But he is different than I am. Very revealing in how our people want everybody, you know, cookie cutter. They want everybody stamped out the same way. Heavily reliance upon moral instead of material authority as basis for cohesion and open success. And note this, must create a bond based upon trust, not mistrust. You have to bring that up. Trust, not mistrust. Now, when you start talking about trust and mistrust, you're getting what? Now, when you think of trust or mistrust, now you're getting to the moral dimension. That's a moral dimension. Ethical dimension. He said, how is this atmosphere achieved? Only one way, by example. Physical agility, physical energy, mental agility, and moral authority. And if you can demonstrate those kinds of things, then you can get people to cooperate and take those initiatives. What is the price? No free lunch in this game. Courage to share danger and discomfort at the front. In other words, you're going to be able to share those same goddamn problems other people share. Then they know you understand. Willingness to support and promote even unconventional and difficult support. They can do these kinds, accept danger, demonstrate initiative, take risks, etc. As a matter of fact, in the German equivalent to what we call our OER, does everybody know what OER means? Officers' Effectiveness Report. Their equivalent, their system, up at least to World War II. They had a statement in there, a code word they put in there, this officer's a difficult subordinate. You know what that meant? Promote early. And our system is 2. And he explains it very well. He says, the reason why is if you've got a guy that has these characteristics, that means he's going to be a pain in the rear to a superior. Automatic. Because he's got a different idea. The guy, gee, you know, it's different. You're doing it different. We didn't do it that way. You've heard people say, so what? question is, has it been thought through? Can it be done in that time? And is it within your moral culture? If you answered yes to that, then what's all this nonsense? You can't violate your culture either, but as long as it's within, see, what's all this garbage? Also, dedication resolve to face up master that starts to define the face of traditional solution. We'll be able to think of it a different way. Instead of having the so-called definitive or elegant solution, or that one we've used, the standard solution for the last 80 years. And the benefit, internal simplicity permits rapid adaptability. You say, my God, that's a strange one, but it really isn't. If you've done all this, you forge those implicit connections or bonds one with the other. You have those shared images, so you can tell somebody to do something and it's done. You adapt instead of having these long, detailed orders, new instructions, all that. It's inherent. Now here's the chart in a book that I read, or passage listed out of a book that I ran into about 2 or 3 weeks after I talked to Paul, so it really caused these passages to leap out at me in these 3 pages, 124. The underlines are mine, for instance. I'll let you read it and I'll comment. The key point I'm trying to make, if you look at these things that are underlined, they're all related to one another very directly, even if they're occurring at different times. So let's build upon that relationship. And so if we look and start pulling some things together, some insights we can pull up relative to all of the false ideas. All I'm saying is these ideas are related to one another. I showed the previous chart. We look at those comments, 124, 160, 165, they suggest that moral effects related to the menace posed by the Zeppelin and the uncertainty associated with not knowing what to expect or how to deal with it. Remember, they never experienced that before. It's a menace, they don't know how to deal with it. So for a first cut, we can say, in some sense, moral effects must be related to menace and uncertainty. It's a way of thinking about it. Anyway. But it seems to leave some things out. In other words, we don't bring in the collective aspect, collective moral strength. Or we'll point out here, you gotta get trust. Remember, guerrilla commanders, other people have to try to generate mistrust. We're all talking about having trust. So if you're living in an environment of conflict, adversarial relationships, these things come together. You have to deal with this. Trust and mistrust. So it really suggests, if you put it all together, that moral strength in some way represents capacity to overcome menace, uncertainty, and mistrust. Menace, uncertainty, and mistrust. So building upon that, we're going to start making some definitions here, just as a way of getting into it. So if we go back to Clausewitz, remember what I told you, he brought out fear, anxiety, and alienation in a noble counterweight, courage, confidence, and spree. If we tie that in with the moral strength, we make these other definitions: moral victory, moral defeat, moral advantage, and moral authority. They begin to start leaping out at you. You start pasting that together. And of course, the one we're going for is moral authority. Person or body can give one courage, confidence, and spree to overcome menace, uncertainty, and mistrust. I've got some better ways of talking about that than I'll do, but I want to go through this right now. In fact, I'm going to come out with some new work that I'm doing some research on. But he brings it very much related where I say you can't morally isolate somebody, you have to morally isolate yourself. You really can't. Because mentally you can, physically you can, morally you really does yourself. You set shape circumstances so it can happen. In a sense, you doesn't. Okay, with that in mind, let's pull it together. It's not what I call, at least for a first cut, essence of moral conflict. So you're creating, exploit, magnify these things: menace, uncertainty, and mistrust. And the idea, and the aim. So that has a very high negative content. So, you know, it's a suspicion that's what they have there. It seems to be called one-sided. So let's see if we can pick up the positive side. It's like positive has a negative emotional factors, also positive. Let's see if we can pick up the positive side. And a way of getting into that is, let's just look at with mistrust. The presence of mistrust implies a rough, loosened human bond. Suggests harmony in something. We've got to be able to get some kind of a harmony so people can build up these bonds of trust. That's one thing. In dealing with uncertainty, you have to have, you can't make things certain. Life's just not that work that way. You have to be able to be adaptable, deal with that uncertainty. And we have to face menace. You just can't say we're going to be friendly. You have to take initiative. You may be unfriendly. On the other hand, you may be able to make it be friendly. So if we paste all these things together, we can modify that chart somewhat and look at it a bit different, what I call both negative and positive factors, or counterweights. So we have menace, uncertainty, mistrust, and counterweights, initiative. Internal drive to think and take action without being urged. Adaptability, power to adjust or change. Harmony, interaction apparently disconnected in a connected way. That doesn't mean they're all one-to-one, it's kind of in one-to. So then you have both a negative aim and a positive aim. What are moral values? We use the word a lot. Maybe you want to look at that. It's very important.
Well, I mean, according to your definition, which works real well, moral values are things a group of people would have in common that enable them to have initiative, adaptability, and harmony among each other.
That's one way. I'm taking it deeper. I'm going beyond like the word. What are they? You know what they are? Let's say everybody can do anything they wanted to do. There are no constraints. Christ, the thing wouldn't hold together, would it? So moral values, or moral standards, they're constraints on individual behavior so the organic whole can exist. If everybody has freedom of action, you have no organic whole.
Well, supposedly,
You may tell them what to do, but that's a constraint, as well as not tell them what not to do. That tells them they have to operate in a directed way. That's a constraint on their individual behavior, of one kind or another. I'm going to get into it deeply. That doesn't mean it's bad.
supposedly in the absence of all constraints, the moral values are what surface. The moral values are the only thing that keep you together in the absence of all constraints.
But they are what? How do you build up moral values over time because the imprint of your culture that what thou shalt do, what thou shalt not do, or how one will interact with others. So in that sense, a moral value or ethical value is a constraint of one kind or another, of how you're going to behave. And that's to allow the group to survive. Think about it. No, it's not bad, it's good. But in the end, it's some kind of constraint. You just can't give everybody total freedom of action, the whole thing goes to hell. Well, thou shalt do this, or thou shalt not do this, or thou will act this way, or etc., or however you want to say it, or ethical practices in business, whatever it is. It may not be written down, it makes no difference. Okay, then, a moral value in some sense then, are standards of behavior, codes of conduct, etc. So if you have moral isolation, what do you have? Now we're going to get down to it. I'm trying to lead you somewhere. When you morally isolate somebody, you really know he isolates himself. That's an inability. It's related to the inability of individuals or groups to abide by codes of conduct, standards of behavior, deemed acceptable or essential to others outside. Inability to abide by codes of conduct, standards of behavior, or systems of values deemed acceptable or essential to others outside those individuals or groups. So, the alienation takes place is when you violate those codes of conduct and standards that are deemed acceptable because it permits the group to exist, and you alienate yourself. Now, some people do it, they try to get away with it, but once it's surfaced and made visible, they're too. In other words, don't hose your friend. Particularly by trying to cover it up, we find out it's formed off. Now that doesn't mean it's not going to happen. Sometimes you may do it, you may not even know you did. You better correct it. Most of these things are corrected. But they are. You're going to make mistakes. We all do. Of course, different cultures are going to have their standards and behavior might be a little different. These are very important. If you really don't want to make something, he has to do it himself by making those progress. But mentally, you can isolate it. Because what's mental isolation? Inability to do what? Perceive or make sense of what's going on around yourself. So if you can set up the pace of events or cause things to happen, the guy's mentally isolated, he doesn't know what the hell's going on. He's disoriented. Over disorientation. So now military tends to think mostly, you know, they're cutting lines of communication, that kind of stuff. That's physical isolation. Trying to isolate the guy so he can't get sustenance so he can keep his operations going. That's a material aspect. Then you go mental isolation. Now you get the guy so he's confused, can't keep up, he starts coming unglued, gets demoralized. Now, let's assume you demoralize someone because of mental isolation. Start seeing things that come unglued. And let's say those bonds between them weren't too strong, or there were some little devious things were done and overlooked. Now, remember what I said? Defeat is an orphan, and victory has 1,000 fathers. Pretty soon everybody's pointing the finger at everybody else. That's when the moral parts of these things begin to show up. Who's a rat? Very important. Okay. With that in mind, let's go to the synthesis. Pattern for successful operation. In one sense, you have to have some kind of a goal or aim in mind. Plan defeated, action defeated the plan, support defeat the action command, you got to glue it all together. So what are we talking about here? Let's start laying it out. What is our goal? In some sense, what you're trying to do is diminish your adversary's freedom of action while improving yours, so that he cannot cope and you can't with things that begin to unfold. And so when you cut his lines of communication, when you disorient him, kind of telling him, you're really inhibiting his freedom of action. And so your plan, you want to probe, unmask his strengths, weaknesses, and maneuvers, in other words, get right inside his great Sun Tzu. Employ a variety of methods, interweave menace, uncertainty, mistrust of these, tangles of these things. Sever his moral ties, disorient his mental images, etc. Mask, distort, magnify, arbitrate. Sometimes mask, sometimes distort, sometimes magnify. That in turn gives you the ability to select initiative or response that is least expected, whether it be moral, mentally, or physically. That'll permit you to establish in these things, focus the main effort together with other efforts and pursue directions that permit many happen. Doesn't mean you make them all, but you have all kinds of possibilities. You know, trying to put them in the horns of many dilemmas. Offer many branches and threaten alternative objectives. You can't get a good picture of what's going on. And then to keep that operation going, move along paths of least resistance, right? That allows the paths of least resistance to manifest themselves. You just start exploiting it. Keep pulling the system down further. Now here's an interesting one. Exploit rather than disrupt or destroy those differences or those features within in his system that interfere with his ability to cope with unfolding problems. Let me give you an example, particularly in guerrilla warfare. Guerrillas, I'm referring to this one right here. Guerrillas, if you have like a corrupt province chief, don't really like to take them out. In a second. Because they take out the corrupt province chief, they put someone in there good, then they don't have their basis for the guerrilla movement. So by having a corrupt province chief, they can use that as a recruitment effort to build up their own guerrilla cadre. So they don't want to take that out, unless it's really bad and the people really demand it. Instead, they'll lever that system, build up their own movement. Of course, after they've got it made, then they'll take them out and probably execute them. But not at the time when they use them as a rallying point to build up their own efforts. You see what I'm getting at there? Okay, and then subvert, disorder, disrupt, those things allow him to keep his own act together. Permit him to keep his rules. The idea is to dismember him, isolate him from offense. And the action. Be more inconspicuous, more irregular. The digital basis for the initiative to be guided into his system, exploit his vulnerabilities. Your support. Global communication is essential logistics. Maintain cohesion. Maintain pace of operation, cohesion, overall effort. And command, I call this command of the lifetime. Command of the lifetime. As a matter of fact, these ideas I have here are very, very similar to the ones Mao has. Very similar to what I have for me. How many people read on his On Guerrilla Warfare? Anybody? Mao? The last two or three pages of the book we talked about. I didn't tell you. Pardon? Pardon? No.
You finally stumped us on one.
I was feeling that.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Agreed. Okay. Now I want to draw your attention to something. I want to draw your attention to the plan and action. I want to play with you. And what we're suggesting by that plan and action, these statements that we talked about previous chart. One, we're trying to penetrate his system, mask our system against his penetration. We're trying to create a variety of impressions of what is occurring and what's about to occur, so we can't keep up with it. Generate mismatch between what seems to be and what is. In other words, try to do the wrong thing. And also push him beyond his ability down. In other words,